Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 112 of Discourse in Magic with Ryan Plunkett. Now, this for me was a super cool episode because, you know, when you run a Magic podcast, every now and then you get to interview somebody who can answer your questions that are super relevant to the things that you're working on in that moment. So I got to ask a ton of questions about the Chicago Magic Lounge and sort of get some information for what we're doing in Toronto with the Toronto Magic Company. So you'll hear a ton about the Chicago Magic Lounge, and I wanted to hear some info about the success of the book A New Angle. And I am super obsessed with books and releases and marketing and stuff like that in Magic because we may or may not be doing something fun with Discourse in Magic in the next little while. So it was a super cool episode for me personally, and Ryan is just an awesome guy. So here it is, time to learn a ton with Ryan Plunkett in episode 112. Here we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah.
My name is Tyler.
And we are here with a very special guest. Super excited to dive in. You maybe know him from his book, A New Angle. You maybe know him from the Chicago Magic Lounge, or you might know him from just being awesome on Instagram. We are here with Ryan Plunkett. How are you, Ryan?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Doing really well. Pumped to dive in and talk some Magic and get deeper into some of this performance stuff. So let's start at the very beginning. How did you get into Magic?
Oh, man, that's such a tricky question. I feel like everybody has that story of like, oh, yeah, I started Magic as a kid. You know, I got this Magic kit and that's all I've ever done. But really, that's the story. I mean, ever since I can remember, I got like a Magic kit when I was like 5 years old, and it just kind of snowballed from there. It's one of those things that I could never quite put down. You know, you set it down for a little bit, you study other things, but then it's one of those things you always come back to.
It always comes back. We know we know the feeling, you know, like I definitely had periods of time when I was younger where I put it down for a little bit and then I was like, no, I think I'm going to do that. I think that's what I'm going to play with. So walk us through a little bit from sort of a Magic set, early obsession, can't let go, all the way until what it is that you're doing right now.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as a kid, it's one of those things you always find fascinating. When I was in middle school, I would say, my dad started taking me to Magic conventions. I grew up in Dallas, so we would always frequent the TAOM, or the Texas Association of Magicians convention. And we would do that every year. That was like my treat for being good in the school year. We would go to this convention. And so that's one of those things that just kind of took root, took hold. So when I hit high school, I started working at a magic shop in Dallas called, actually Fort Worth, Texas, called Magic Etc. And I worked there for a number of years behind the counter, pitching product and doing magic that way. And then at the same time, I would also work at this like a baseball stadium doing magic. I would work out in like their suites. I would do stuff in their bar. And it's really funny watching this like 16-year-old kid in a sports bar doing magic for people. I kind of put it down for a little bit. I always did theater in high school. So I went to college to study theatrical lighting design. And so I did that through span of college. And it's one of those things where it's like I always studied magic and I was always practicing. But in college, it's one of those things I wasn't necessarily doing. I always joke that most of my friends in college didn't really know quite what I did.
It's like a secret identity.
Yeah, almost. You feel like you're a Cape Crusader at night, you know, just shuffling cards in your spare time.
Magicians don't reveal their secrets, but you weren't revealing that you were a magician.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. And then I moved to Chicago for the theater scene. And so
okay.
I moved out here to work in lighting and to work in theater. And I did that for a number of years. And then I kind of I met these people who were starting up this weekly show. And I said, well, this is perfect. You know, I've always done magic. I've been working on some writing projects. I started writing A New Angle, probably the middle of college. I started writing that book.
What year was that?
I probably started writing that book in 07, 08.
Okay.
Just casually, and then it kind of grew from there. But then when I moved here in the end of 2014, I would say. Yeah, 2014. And so, 2012 is when I started writing the book.
Wow.
Okay.
So then I moved here, and I met these people who are starting up this weekly show. And I'm like, this is great. This is something I've always wanted to kind of do. I had done it professionally a little bit in college, professionally a little bit in high school, but nothing that I really focused, every ounce of energy on.
Mm-hmm.
So when I moved here, I kind of put everything to the side and just, went head deep into the magic. That's when I put out my first set of notes, Some Assembly Required. Then I finished the book, A New Angle. And then from there, it's just kind of grown and grown and grown. It snowballed. Now the Chicago Magic Lounge is such a big thing. It's the only thing I do.
Yeah.
It's my sole source of income. I'm very lucky in the fact that all I have to worry about is finding people's cards. It's such a silly dream.
It's the dream. So there's so much that I want to talk about in that sort of intro story. One of the first things is just talking about the width of your background in the arts. It started not only with an interest in magic, but then working in a magic store, which if you're listening to this and you've done it, you probably know how much you learn there in terms of who and what and where and stuff like that things come from. But one could only imagine how much information comes at you working in a magic store. But also you did theater in high school and then studied lighting design and stuff like that. So a real surrounding in magic and the performing arts from nearly every direction that one could, and then really taking it on after just by happenstance moving to a city that has a booming magic
scene.
Yeah, everything kind of fell into place. I mean, what I would say about working in a magic shop, I think the biggest thing that you learn is how much crap is out in the magic world. You get a very good sense of what is worth investing in and what is not worth investing in. What somebody did so they could get a quick buck, or something that has really pushed their career forward. That's where I found my deep love for magic books, was working at that shop. You see a lot of these tricks, and that's what they are. They're cheap little tricks that you sell for a high markup, and they kind of wear on you. They're very boring. They kind of make you lose faith in the magic world. But then when you pick up a really great book, you see the passion and the amount of time that people invested in this material. It kind of refreshes your view on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I never even really thought about that. Like when I was younger, first getting into magic, it was my dream to work in the magic store. I mean, the idea of just demoing tricks all day would be so much fun because I enjoyed going and pointing at the shelf and say, do that one, do that one, do that one.
Sure.
But I never really thought of it as you don't get to choose what your repertoire is, right? The same way, when you go walk around, do table stuff, you perform what you want to perform, not what the customer wants to see.
Sure.
So I could definitely see it being sort of disheartening having to perform magic you don't love.
You kind of feel like a used car salesman almost.
Right. Yeah.
You have the four things that you need to push that week. You have I have to sell 15 ball and vases. I have to sell 30 stripper decks this week. I have to sell 10 color Montes. So you have your things that you're kind of forced to do, tricks almost that you don't care about. I mean, how many of us really perform color Monte at a show?
Right. And you also have this weird discrepancy where, the people who you're loyal to are the pros who are coming in to get unique things, but maybe that makes up 10-15% of the market, whereas most of the people coming in are there for their first or third or fourth time, and you're still giving them plastic or again, one of those things that you're trying to have to push. So it's a real discrepancy because like it's a community for the people who deserve it, but it's still like a used car shop for the ones who don't.
Yeah, and I've always had this love-hate relationship with magic shops. Like magic shops can do so much good, but they can also be a place where it kind of perpetuates the idea that you can just buy a secret, because that's what a magic shop is, right? Whereas magicians often tend to lose creativity because they just do whatever the instructions tell them to do. You know, I see a lot of people that fall in the trap where they don't quite put their own spin on things. They don't quite make it their own because all of the hard work has been done for them.
Yeah, and that's something I think a lot of magicians, particularly young magicians or new magicians, fall into, right? Like you read the patter that comes with the one trick. It's a really interesting sort of, we've heard it before, I started out performing in the magic shop and getting my chops there. And I think it's awesome that you've managed to progress to the point where you're doing magic full time in a setting that you love. Why don't you tell us a little bit how you got involved with the Chicago Magic Lounge and how that all sort of came to be?
Yeah, sure. So when I first moved to Chicago, I was doing a little bit of theater, but I was also working full time as a graphic designer. So I was working from home. I had a lot of free time outside of the work I was doing. And so I was really hungry for more activities, something to keep me busy. I had all of this. So when I moved here, I lived in a small studio apartment. I lived by myself. I worked at home. I worked remotely with people who didn't even live in the same state as me.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of introspective time, you could say.
A lot of time to start writing a book, you might say.
Yeah, exactly. So I heard about these guys that were trying to start up a weekly show, and they had a preview night. It was the theater that they were renting space from didn't quite have their liquor license yet, so it was one of those BYOB situations. Like, show up, it's like a $10 cover, bring a 6-pack, and just have a good night. So I said, well, I haven't done anything in like a week. I've just been sitting at home. So let me go see what this is all about. So I show up, I went by myself. I had a 6-pack of beer and I sat in like the 4th row. And I had a great time. I met some really great people that night. And then one of the owners found out that I was a magician. And he found out I was from Texas. He's also from Texas. So he said, well, come over here, jump behind the bar and do something for us, And so I jumped back there and I started doing some stuff that I would later put out in a new angle. And at this point, I had been doing this material for, so many years at magic conventions, just frying people with it.
Yeah. Because
I didn't tell anybody I used a tapered deck. It was the most unassuming thing in the world. And I just started frying them. And he said, well, what are you doing next week? I said, well, I'm not really doing anything, He said, well, okay, well, show up next Thursday, bring a suit, you're hired. So I'm like, great. Okay, sure. So I did that. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. They had a logo that wasn't very good, you could say. And so I said, well, I'm a graphic designer. Let me make you a new logo. They said, great. I said, well, I design websites and your website really sucks. Let me do your website for you. Oh, you need help booking acts? Well, let me help you with that too. And so it was one of those things where I didn't really ask. I just started taking on more responsibility, and I just kind of told them that these things needed to happen. So I started doing more and more. And it's one of those things that the more I took on, the more they kind of let go. And they're like, sure, yeah, we would love somebody to actually design a website for us. So yeah, you do that. And so just assuming more and more responsibility, my role in the organization just kind of continued to grow and grow and grow. And as the project grew and as the shows grew, I kind of took on more and more of an important role in that process. And now, we have our new space.
Yeah, which is beautiful, by the way.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous space. And it's one of those things where it was like I was in the right place at the right time with the right skill sets. to help the project succeed in the way that I could help them with. Like I by no means do everything in that venue. We have a huge team of wonderful people, but at the time I was the right person for the right job. I did magic, I did design, I did web. I did all of these things, and it just so happened that was the void that they needed filled.
So I'd love to get some insight or advice. I don't know if you know, but Ben and I are doing the Toronto Magic Company here in Toronto. So we've got a whole bunch of different, we've got a weekly show, which is an open mic night for magic. And we've got sort of monthly shows where we put on multiple magicians. And it's just mega inspiring to see what sort of thing can come of it by listening to you talk about the Chicago Magic Land. And a lot of these experiences that you're talking about resonate for us. Every now and again at one of the weekly shows, someone shows up. We're like, hey, who's this guy? He's like, yeah, I'm a magician. I just moved to this town. We're like, oh, show me something. It sounds like your story. So yeah. I'm wondering what sort of advice or insight you have as to how something like that could grow to be something large, both as a city staple for lay people, as well as something awesome to exist for magicians.
Yeah, and the Toronto Magic Company is actually something that I've been following a little bit here and there. I'm good friends with Ben Train, and I kind of see him when he does stuff for you guys. I don't know how involved he is with the company.
It's just me and him that run it. That's it.
Oh, that's great. So I see him posting about it from time to time, and you actually mentioned it. One of the big things that I think a lot of people don't realize is that magic is meant for the lay audience. Yeah. And I think a lot of shows who gear toward magicians don't necessarily realize that there's no magic or there's no money in magicians.
Yeah.
People in the lay public are so hungry for magic that they need a show geared toward them, Mm-hmm. One thing, I love the Magic Castle, but one thing that I don't necessarily love about it is that it's magic for magicians, really,
Maybe some celebrities, but it's
some celebrities, maybe if you're lucky to get in there. But their whole thing is that they're a clubhouse, people have to be a member in order to get in and see magic. Whereas I think that kind of isolates magic a little bit. It kind of puts it on a pedestal when really magic should be meant for the people. So I would say that that's one big thing is our first and primary goal was to do magic for the lay public.
Right.
And I think that's very important.
What were some of the tactics you used to make sure that was the service you were providing? Like what issues other than the exclusivity of the Magic Castle do you sort of see, and what were you trying to avoid?
One thing that we do is we highlight a number of performers each night. So if you come see like our weekend show, there are 7 magicians on the bill, ranging in styles.
Right.
So it's one of those things where we want to show a variety of magic, but we also want to make sure that we're curating the performers to make sure that they're not only different from each other, but they're great in their own ways. Another thing is we're marketing straight to places like TripAdvisor and Yelp,
right?
Things that audiences actually take into consideration.
Audiences are looking for.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're not posting on the Magic Circle being like, hey, we have a venue now.
Exactly. Yeah. Our goal is to do magic for people. Another thing that we found early on is the best way we could figure out how to get traction was to have a consistent schedule. And I think that this was really important for the beginning of our show as well. We had a show every single Thursday. If you missed this Thursday, there's another show next Thursday. Right. And so that consistency also helped bring audiences back. They had something that they could count on. Well, every Thursday, we can go see this show at this theater. And so it was one of those things where that Thursday became so successful that the theater recognized that and was like, okay, well, we have the Saturday early show open if you want to take that as well. So now we went from a show that was once a week. So now we're twice a week, right? And so that consistency kept bringing people back at something that they could count on, which is something where it's like I see some magic shows where they're like, we're once a month. We're every third Wednesday of the month.
Yeah. So our show used to be the first 2 Tuesdays of every month. And I've been pushing for it to be weekly for exactly that reason. And it's now weekly, and like some of the shows, it's been weekly for like a month and a half now or so. And I think maybe one of the shows had a little bit of a smaller audience than anyone would have liked. But for the most part, like, it just started being weekly, and we're doing it for exactly that reason, is because we want people to know that we're there every Tuesday. If you come on Tuesday, we're going to be there putting on a show, and there's you can't miss it.
It's a better thing to know. Like, if it's Tuesday and you're not doing anything, you could go to a magic show, versus being like, it's Tuesday and I have nothing to do. Which Tuesday is it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of those things. People get so busy that they don't necessarily like searching for like an hour to find something to do. They like the choice to be an easy choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're like, I've heard about this thing. It's Tuesday. Let's go to that thing. Whereas, let me go to their website. Let me see when they're doing a show. Like, the big thing about the Chicago Magic Lounge is we're 7 days a week. Any day of the week, you can come see a show with us. Any day of the week.
Yeah, so that's amazing.
It's a very easy choice. We produce 9 shows a week, which is a crazy number.
Yeah, that's super crazy. And I know, because we do like weekly and then maybe one other or something, and I'm still out of my mind with the amount of shows we're producing. And we've also got, like, we do the Dave and Buster's one. It's just like, I'm just out of my mind the amount of shows that I'm producing. So thinking of like nine
shows a week
is crazy. A lot of that. Those questions were sort of based for me, for the Toronto Magic Company, for some advice. But let's say someone lives in a city where this sort of thing doesn't exist. What would you recommend to them to get something like this going?
One thing that we've noticed in Chicago is that Chicago audiences are very supportive, but they're very interested in seeing new kinds of art. Chicago is such an ensemble-based city. Like, even the improv here, and I've heard that Toronto has a very similar vibe to Chicago. I've heard this.
Very similar.
Very, very similar. But Chicago has such a deep history in magic already. Like, through the last 40 years, there have been something like 30 magic bars in the city. There's improv everywhere. There's great theater in the city. So Chicago has always been an environment where it's so ensemble based, and people are so willing to go out and enjoy
the arts. Yeah.
That we've noticed that we haven't necessarily had such a hard time convincing people that they need to see magic, because people, one, love magic, and two, have been exposed to so much bad magic that it's so refreshing to see good magic.
Yeah, and I imagine, like someone with people have their stereotypes as to what magic is, and then someone, walks into the Chicago Magic Lounge and watches a world-class show, and you just zap that stereotype right out of them. Like, you put like a nerdy 17-year-old with a rabbit in a hat image in their head or whatever. I'm just making up thoughts,
right?
And then compare that to what they're looking at the Chicago Magic Lounge, and you've just blown that right out of the water. So that obviously has a huge effect. Just in general, the quality of the art that you're putting together. Because if someone's willing to take that risk to come and see it, you do want to blow that expectation right out of the water and show them what the incredible art of magic is.
And what I will say is context plays a big key in that. You could have Max Maven performing at a Chuck E. Cheese, for example, and it's the strangest, least interesting thing you've ever seen. Maybe that would be interesting. Who knows? But
I would love to see Max Maven at Chuck E. Cheese. That would be an amazing evening.
I would pay for that, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
But then you put him, he came and did our opening weekend at the Chicago Magic Lounge, and you put a guy like that in that environment, and it's, world-class magic. But what I would suggest for people who are starting up something like this, find a context where magic makes sense and push it to the lay public. I look at, there's a guy in town named Dennis Watkins, and he does a show at the Palmer House Hilton downtown, and it's one of the nicest hotels in downtown Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And he does just a really elegant evening of magic for about 25 people. I think 25 is what the room holds. It's very similar to like a Steve Cohen feel, or a Dan White at the Nomad. Like, it has that very similar feel to it. But look at those places. The context in which they're seeing magic is an elevated context, right? Mm-hmm. You have a magician dressed to the nines in one of the nicest hotels in their downtown city, right? But if you put that same magician in that same show in any other context, it might not have the same impact. So I think a big thing is finding the right performer for the right context in the right environment.
Yeah, I think that plays a huge role. And particularly for somebody who maybe wants to start out, you know, I know for me, I've been doing magic all of my life. And I know that nothing has been more amazing than performing literally 4 or 5 times a week. Like, that's really game changing. And I can imagine somebody who lives in a city where they don't have the benefit of being on one of these lineups or having one of these regular shows, that they might take this as encouragement to do it. And I think that it's great advice to say, you know, look at what venue you can get your hands on, look at what sort of show you can produce, and start making it. You know, as long as there's 10 people in the audience, you got a show, right? Like, you don't need, like, you don't even need that. You could do a little close-up show for like 8. I don't know. You can do anything. So
if you can fill the first row, you can get a photo with the backs of heads, and then you know your social media looks great. That's all that matters.
So when I was at the council recently, they said, "What's the minimum number of people that you want in your audience in order to do a show?" And I said, "Man, if there's like 4 people in here, I'll do a show for those 4 people. Like, they're going to have a great time regardless, you know?"
Yeah, and that's the mentality.
Yeah. You don't necessarily have to have a huge audience to have a great show. You know, some of the best shows I've seen have been the smallest audiences, you know? It just depends on the goal. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So let's transition a little bit and talk about a new angle. So that is, you know, we have a lot of people on who have put together books, and, you know, a lot of the time you'll catch me being like, yeah, this looks like a great book, but straight up, I bought the book. I love the book. I've read it through twice. It's amazing. And there's a trick in it, which is, it's sort of, I read it and I automatically went, oh, I know how I could use this for something. And I've been brewing up using it as a version of a trick that fooled me many, many, many years ago. Totally different method, but it's just such a powerful book. There's so many incredible tools where you're reading it and you're like, oh, I got to start using a tapered deck. You know, this is amazing. So for people that don't know what the book is, quickly walk them through what the book is about.
Sure. When I graduated from high school, I'll give you the long drawn out story. So when I graduated from high school, I had a good friend of mine named Brian O'Neill, who manufactured some low cost card cutters. It's one of those things where card cutters have always been so expensive and so out of the reach of normal people that he wanted to make something that was affordable, that could bring that tool to more people, right? So he manufactured these cutters that retailed for like $100. And I thought that was really cool. So for my graduation, he gave me one of those cutters, and I thought it was the neatest shit I had seen all minute. So I was obsessed. I was cutting decks left and right. But then when I was looking around for material to do with them, I couldn't find anything. You know, nobody really uses it.
It was just the like basic pamphlet on a stripper deck.
Yeah, it was like
101 tricks.
To do with a stripper deck. It was just very, very elementary, and it didn't seem like the tool had grown any. I mean, it's one of those things that's been around for 100 plus years, used in the gambling world. You know, one of the best secrets in Magic, sold at every Magic shop that nobody is using. And I thought that was such a silly thing.
Yeah.
So throughout college, and a little bit past that, I started just tinkering with it. You know, I would use it. I mean, the huge benefit of a tapered deck is that not only is it a gimmick deck, but it's also the most normal deck of cards you've ever had. Like you can do any trick ever with that deck of cards.
And
so
it really, like, depending on how tapered it is, but you really can give it to someone and they're gonna flip through it and look for markings or something, and and you can fly right by with one of those things.
I mean, I've had decks that I've cut very heavy-handedly, where I've just like hacked off a corner, and I've handed them to magicians, and I've never been called on it. Like nobody has ever found it. I mean, now that the book's out, everybody knows, but so I have to be a little sneakier with the methods I use. But it's one of those things that people just don't assume you're using, and especially if you cut your own and you have different backs, then it just flies under the radar. But anyway, I started going to this convention called Pebblepalooza in Dallas. It's Lance Pierce's get-together. Cool. He does it once a year. It's like a small crew of people. But there I met Michael Feldman, and I started showing him this material, but I didn't tell him what it was. So the first year I met him, I started showing him this material, and it just kind of fried him. Then the next year I came back, we jammed again, and I showed him some more material using it. And he goes, "All right, I didn't ask last year, but I have to ask, like, what the hell are you doing?" So I showed him. I showed him the work, and he was just floored. And we got to thinking, like, this is one of those things that really needs a resurgence. It's one of those things that people really need to start paying more attention to. Yeah. And so we slowly started putting this book together, and it took us about 5 years to ultimately get it published. But it was one of those things where we would write in a Google Doc, we would write back and forth until finally we had something we were proud of, and that we could put out and share with the world. So that's kind of the long, drawn-out version. The material in the book is stuff that I use. Like my closer to my professional show is in that book, which I'm stupid for releasing, but I think it'll spark creativity elsewhere.
Well, it's an incredible book, and I think it's one of those books, sometimes you get a magic book and you open it up and you're like, wow, these are all great, like, nth versions of tricks, like this is just another variation of a trick which I know very well already, and you're like, is it really worth learning this whole new handling just because it's a new handling by this guy instead of that guy? And no harm for people who are creating those kinds of books, because that it pushes magic forward sort of inch by inch, but then you Absolutely. Get a book like yours, which just takes a leap and a bound, and it gives people that reminder that use a little secret, and then you can really make big waves. So I definitely want to personally thank you for that book, and it's an incredible piece, and it's something that I'll keep referring to when I'm like, you know what, I gotta fool someone this week. This is a week I gotta really fry this guy. So I love that, and it's one of those things. Let me ask, do you, as people who work on stack work, are constantly in stack, do you exclusively use tapered decks?
That's a tricky question. Now that the book has come out,
no.
I use it less. In the past, I used to bring it everywhere. It was one of those things where I could do any of the other material, but then I had that ready to go when I needed it. Whereas now that people are kind of privy to the info, I have to use it much more sparingly. In order to get a bigger effect. Because now when I'm at a convention, people will grab my cards and feel for them.
Yeah,
they'll check them because they know. And I will say that a lot of the material came out of the book was something where I was doing another trick, and then I noticed a benefit in the cards. When I say that, like, say you're doing a collector's routine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you get halfway through another handling and you realize that, like, oh, every other card is reversed. I wonder how I can take advantage of this situation.
Right.
Or there's an idea in the book where I talk about the cherry control and how you can use that from a tapered deck.
Yeah.
And that when you do the move, that card ends up re-reversing itself and correcting the orientation. And there are a lot of things where you can just use those cards normally, and you can see hidden benefits that present themselves to you, and it's just about noticing those benefits.
Yeah. Oh man, it's such a good book. I wanted to ask you on the note of it about sort of a little bit more in depth on how you and Michael Feldman put it together, because it sounds like you were doing this stuff and fooling the pants off of him. And then what happened? Did he go home to the drawing board and pull some effects together? Or how did it come about that you guys ended up pairing together on this project? Because he obviously had a huge impact on the book. When I'm reading it, I can tell that sort of that you did so much and he did so much, but the story as you tell it sounds like you're the fooler and he's the foolee.
Well, let me say that the book wouldn't exist without Michael Feldman. Like, he did such an immense amount of work on this book.
Yeah.
Like, that, I can't understate that enough. Like, this book would not exist without the two of us coming together. I didn't have the time necessarily to start writing all these routines down. So when we first met, it kind of ignited a spark in both of us. So we would go back and forth, send each other videos of like, well, what if you used it like this? And he would say, well, what if you used it like this? And it was one of those back and forth things that this material was really cultivated with that collaboration going back and forth between the both of us.
And that's, by the way, just to interject on this, which I'd love to hear more about, but it's so interesting to know that the book is almost the outcome of endless jamming, and jamming through the internet. And it's just a little reminder to people that you can find someone in this world of magic who's got similar interests as you do, and start jamming on things and pushing things to the new level, video by video. And, when you think about the book as not a collection of tricks that each of you has, but rather sort of a documentation of the best version of a 5-year-long jam or whatever the case may be, it really opens up the thought as to what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it was truly an obsession for us. Everything always came back to this project. And of course, we worked on other things on the side, but it was one of those things where, you have an idea and you share it. And so I would share an idea with Feldman. He would make it better, share it back with me. Then I would improve it, share it back with him. And it was just this back and forth. And the book is almost kind of like what sparked our friendship, Michael is one of my best friends in magic. Not necessarily because of this book, but this book had a lot to do with bringing us closer together. And when you find somebody who speaks the same language as you, that's a really special thing. You can jam with anybody, but maybe they necessarily won't speak on the same level as you, or maybe they throw out ideas that aren't necessarily quite what you're going for. But when you do find somebody who speaks the same aesthetic language as you and speaks on the same level of is as competent as you, then it really helps flourish creativity.
Yeah, I love collaboration is something that I think is so overlooked, particularly in magic. It's such a huge part of it. We learn from each other, we share together, but I mean, you spend so much time alone in your room staring at a mirror that you can, forget how important a fresh set of eyes can be.
It's why this podcast exists, right? Like, we started this because we were so, every time we would jam, we would just flip around the cards in our hands, but talk theory. And we were just like, what are we doing? It's time to put this out, So again, like this podcast is a catalog of thoughts and ideas that are being jammed on, instead of a step-by-step project. It's just us jamming out with theory with incredible magicians. So it definitely came from sort of that site of, here's someone who thinks about things the same way that I do. And I think that that's such a powerful thing in magic. If you can find someone that thinks about things like you do, don't let go, start sending each other videos or something like that.
And more than that, I think that, in regards to your book, I find it to be, almost inspiring at the fact that collaboration is what made the book come together, and it fed the creativity that made the effects. But you also mentioned that you put the closer to your show in your book, and that may have been a bad idea, but you said that it would feed creativity, so you think it's worth it. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and what ideas are worth sharing and what ideas are worth keeping to yourself and why?
I think ultimately when you decide to put out material, it's not, at least the way I look at it, it's not a look at me kind of thing. It's I have done this for, X amount of time. I've found this amount of success in it. But in order to move on and to create something better, you almost have to find closure in the material. And so a big thing with writing this book between me and Feldman was not necessarily so we could gain all of the glory and gain all the credit for coming up with these great things. It was so that we could find closure in the material and move past it. It's not one of those things where we wanted to hold on to it for 100 years and, it'd be this grand secret and,
we'll find out how it works when you died, right?
Yeah, we never wanted it to be that thing. We wanted to find closure in the material so we could explore other things.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important in magic.
There's a thought by Tim Ferriss who said that, one of the reasons why he wrote his book was to just get it out of his brain. There was just too much of it bouncing around in there, and he just had to put it out on paper, give it to the world, and then it no longer required to sit in his brain any longer. And I think that it's a fun reason to document stuff, whether people end up buying it or not. It's a great reason to document things. It's just, I got this stuff bouncing around so hard in my brain. It's time to put it on paper. Release it for free. Who cares? But it's just an opportunity to get some of that stuff out from bouncing around in your brain. So I definitely like that idea for a reason to start putting a project like that together.
Yeah, once you let it go, it leaves room for you to try new things. You have to erase some of the data and make space on the hard drive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and now I'm working on other things. I didn't necessarily put the taper deck behind me, but now it's kind of brewing. It's sitting in the back of the mind. Maybe I'll have another great idea. Who knows? But now I can focus on other methods, other plots, other things that interest me, and I don't have to feel like I have to maintain all of this intense focus on one thing anymore. I can kind of move past it and use this as a growing, like a step stool almost.
And time to write a book about marked cards or something.
Well, people keep joking. They're like, so the next one's on the Svengali deck, right?
Right.
And I'm just like, well, no, it's not.
That stuff I'm keeping close to me.
Yeah, it was one of those things where it was never about finding something that everybody had. It was never about taking an old tool and repurposing it. It was always about, hey, we found this thing interesting and we think more people should talk about it. Our intention was never, well, let's take something that everybody knows and let's write a book on it. The book just kind of happened, to be honest. Like, it was never something, because people ask us all the time, they're like, are you going to put out a DVD with all the material? Well, no, the goal wasn't to release a DVD. It was to write a book,
Yeah.
So when's the DVD coming? Because
very soon.
With that, maybe I'm wrong, but I was under the impression that it was like nearly sold out or hard to get your hands on now. Is that true, or where can people go to find one?
It is. I think Murphy's has like 20 copies left. I have just enough for my upcoming lectures. So it's getting very hard to find. We printed a run of 1,000, and we're down to probably less than 60 copies available.
Wow.
Congratulations. That's a feat.
Well, what's so incredible is that with 1,000 of them only, it made such a punch in the magic community. Like, how is everybody talking about this if there's only 1,000 of them?
You know what, man? That you got me. We never expected it to be. We never expected it to be like this. I mean, we went through a couple of publishers that ultimately, ended up not wanting to put it out after a while, and we're like, okay, we kind of got we got a little down on ourselves. We're like, well, this is such a niche project, and it's not going to appeal to everybody, So, let's just put it out, and maybe 100 people will buy it and really like it. So it was never one of those things where we had the utmost confidence in publishing it that it would be a huge hit. Like, to this day, Feldman and I are still surprised that people care about this book.
Well, I think it's an awesome project and a real testament to the work and the obsession that you guys put into it. So, yeah, if you're listening to this and you're excited by the book, get it before you can't. Now's the time to get it. So there's your little, now's the time to get it. So with that, we are nearing the end of the episode, and some of the things that we do are some wrap up questions to get sort of a feel for how different magicians feel about the same topic. So one of the first ones, which I'm very excited to find out your thoughts on, is what is something in the 2018-2019 space of magic that you like, and something in the 2018-2019 space of magic that you dislike?
Ooh. This is a great question.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, man. What? I should have thought about this. Let's see. Things I don't like. There are a lot of things I don't like. The things I do like seems to be the resurgence of magic for the public. I think that magic is really making a big comeback. Like, I see even Netflix is investing very heavily in magic right now. Yeah. And I think that's really good for magic. I'm trying to think of things I don't like. Man, you might have stumped me.
Ha-ha!
Can I give you another thing that I do like?
Yeah, you can do whatever you want. There's no rules. It's a podcast.
Yeah, this is my podcast now.
That's right.
Another thing that I really do like about 2018 is almost the resurgence of the magic book. I feel like in the past couple of years and coming up, there's been just a wealth of really great knowledge making its way to print, and I think that's something really great. I know Vanishing Ink publishes are doing a lot of really heavy work in the publishing field. Magic Ink has been putting out a lot of great work, and then a lot of artists. Like I'm really looking forward to Aussie Wynn's book coming out. Derek Delgadio's book just came out. I'm going through that. So I've just been fascinated with the wealth of knowledge that's been making its way to print recently. I'm really excited for that to keep going.
I think that's a really good thoughts. And I also really like that both of those things are real resurgence, you know? Like shows for lay people are back in the light, and books are back in the light, and you're getting a little bit of things repeating themselves, which is really awesome.
The next section is the question, or next question, I guess, wrap up portion. I don't even know what this is.
Don't ask me. I don't know.
Yeah, it's our podcast, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
He took it over.
Right. Ryan, what's the next one? Go. No. So it's the question of the week. So basically, you get to ask our audience a question. It can be something you want them to ask themselves, something introspective, or it could be like a poll, something you want to hear their responses to. Basically, you have their ears. What question do you want to ask our listeners?
Man, another great question. The first thing that comes to mind might be the question of anybody can have an effect on magic. What are you actively doing to make magic a better place?
That's great. Sort of what
role do you play?
Yeah, and how are you adding to magic? You know, like what are you doing to push this thing forward a little bit? So I love that question. One of the other things we do is called the endless chain. So in order for the podcast to go on for eternity, we have each magician recommend another magician that should be on the podcast. So who do you think we absolutely must have on the podcast?
Oh, man. You know, so I don't know who you've had in the past.
Don't worry.
Just shoot and we'll tell you if we've had them already.
But somebody that I've been really fascinated with recently, I just did a show with him in Minnesota, is Nick DeFott out of Vegas.
Yeah, I've been messaging with him, working on it.
He's somebody that I'm very inspired by right now. He's just very good at his job, takes it very seriously, and is, you know, just so great.
Yeah, and from what I've seen, he's very funny, and super excited to get him on. That's a very good recommendation, and we'll see what we can do. One of the other segments is called the Magic PSA, so sort of a public service announcement for magicians. We've had everything from stop doing banana bandana, all the way to just sort of advice like love your craft and love what you do. So you have something, a little word of warning or advice to the magicians of the world. What do you want to warn them or tell them?
Man, don't do vanishing bandana might be the most important thing I've ever heard come out of somebody's mouth.
Yeah. I think that was
I think we've gotten it like three times now, something like that.
That's so good. Oh man. PSA. Let's see. You guys are really good at this question thing. It's like you guys have a podcast or something.
Yeah, we're kind of like okay interviewers, and then right at the end we have like five solid questions.
Like to this was hard anyway. At the end. Time to get hard.
Oh, man.
We wear you down for an hour and then
Magic PSA. I think I really do think that more people should spend some time diving into the magic of the past. Like I think more people should spend time diving through like the old magazines like the Apocalypse and the Sphinx and the Phoenix and the Jinx. I think more people should really dive into the magic of the past in order to inform the magic of the future.
Awesome.
I think that's a great direction to go in and
learn your history.
There's an endless like wealth of this stuff. So, instead of trying to focus on what the newest thing is out there, maybe find something old and scan through it. That's the only way you're gonna fool a magician with some older than them, not newer than them. Like that's the way.
Well, yeah, definitely. Magic is almost cyclical in a way. Like there's a thought where it's like there's no new tricks. Everything that has been invented or everything that is going to be invented has already been invented. That it's just kind of this cyclical nature,
Yeah.
So when you dive into the past, you're
diving into the future.
Yes, exactly.
There you go.
There it is.
And our final segment is our favorite part. So people have been listening to this for nearly an hour, and there's a lot of information to digest. So each of us, all three of us, go through and mention sort of what we think is either our favorite part or one of the most important parts of this episode as a take-home point. So for me, I've got my mind really wrapped around the Toronto Magic Company and the Chicago Magic Lounge, and I'm obsessed with the idea of putting the efforts into pushing this sort of thing towards lay people, because this podcast, and I'm sure like a lot of the work that magicians do in magic, refeeds and refuels magic. And I think in this 2018 time when magic on stage is growing and magic on TV on stage is growing, and like it's all growing, lay people are getting to watch more magic than they ever have before, and now sort of the time to start gearing and pointing all the arrows towards helping out the lay people. So that was definitely a part for me that really resonated. Tyler, what about you?
In a similar line to what you're saying, I loved how you sort of got involved with the Chicago Magic Lounge and how you ended up working together with Michael Feldman. You basically looked at the tools that you had to offer and then offered them. Like you did graphic design, so you helped with their logo. You do websites, so you just offered to do those things. And because you stepped up and took on those responsibilities, it paid off twofold for you. So that's a bit of a lesson for you people at home. If you have a skill, try to use it. It might turn into something good. Ryan, what about you?
I think I want to piggyback off of that. I think the biggest thing that I think often gets overlooked in magic is the art of collaboration.
Yeah.
You're not going to be good at everything. You're not going to be good at, like I'm not good at things the way Feldman is good at things. Feldman's not good at things the way I'm good at things. Each person has something unique to offer, and to go with that, you should study more than just magic. Like you should have a deep love for other things, because that's only going to inform your magic more. Like I have education in theater that informs my magic. I have education in design that helps me construct my magic. All of these things outside of magic brings you closer to the magic you want to do. And then when you're closer to the magic you want to do, you can collaborate with other people to create even better magic that maybe you can't grasp within your own reach solely, you know?
Yeah, I love that, and it's a reminder for a lot of the people who listen to this, and maybe magic isn't their full-time gig. Maybe it's like a hobby, or maybe it's something they do on the side, that, you know, you might be richer for it. You know, you might be richer for the fact that you've got other things that are helping make your magic more interesting and unique, and or maybe you just have an opportunity for a little bit of the richness. You know, I envy people who haven't been doing magic endlessly since they were 6 years old or whatever, because that's me. And, you know, every now and then I think to myself and I'm like, what is it like to be a layperson? I have no idea, you know, like, how do I see this trick from the point of view of someone who doesn't know how magic works? So
yeah, you get jaded. You've been doing magic for so long, you forget what it's like in the eyes of the layperson. You know, I'm guilty of this too. It's hard to remove magic from the equation when, you know, since I was 5 years old, that's really all I've known.
Yeah.
So it's separating you and your knowledge base from the experience you're trying to present.
100%. And I think that it's a little bit of excitement for people listening, maybe about some of their other skills and talents that should and very much will come into play in their knowledge of magic. Before we go, the last and final thing is plugs. What do you have to plug? Where can people find you?
You
and
mentioned
buy
you have a
what's
lecture
left of your
tour
things?
coming up.
I don't have a lecture tour. I do lectures occasionally. I'm very sparing with my lecture.
Okay.
Just because most of my time is set to performing. I don't have a lot of free time.
Right.
So you can find me at my website, ryancplunkett.com.
Which is a beautiful website, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Like top 10 magic websites ever. Really nice.
Oh, I appreciate that. I'm at the Chicago Magic Lounge every Tuesday through Saturday doing magic. If you're ever in Chicago, hit me up. I don't have a lot to plug. Buy my book if you want. I have a new book in the works. Hopefully in the next couple of years, it'll make its way to the limelight. But, you know, we'll see. Just going to keep my head low, keep
Svengali?
And
Yeah.
it's the Svengali deck, actually.
It's called a new Svengali. A new Svengali. With that, thank you so much. And I think this was an awesome episode. People really got a feel for sort of both ends of what you're doing in the direction of how you're helping magicians with this book and the mystery one to come, as well as all the work you're doing with the Chicago Magic Lounge. And they know that you mean business with a pack of cards because they've been listening to you shuffle them the whole time. So I'm just playing. But thank you so much, Ryan, for joining us on the episode. And big thank you to everybody at home for joining us and learning a little bit about producing magic and writing magic and putting together some awesome magic for lay people. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you all next Thursday.
Take care.
Well, there you have it, episode 112 of Discourse in Magic with Ryan Plunkett. If you liked the episode, if you loved it, if you like the podcast, or if you like what we do here, do me a favor, share it, tell someone, tell the word, spread the word, write a blog, I don't care, do something, tell people, or at the very, very least, if you don't have any friends or there's no one that you can possibly tell, just send me an email or a message and say hi. And I will be super thankful for that. I just want to know that the word is getting out. So thank you so much for being here. Big thank you to Ryan. Hope you go out there and do some performing. And I'll see you guys next Thursday. Peace.